Ivan, thanks so much for coming on today. I'm grateful we can chat for a couple of reasons. First, one of my favorite family traditions is to blast college game day throughout the house on fall Saturdays, and it's that time of year where we get to do that. And your segment on college game day with Tyler Helinski's family is the most memorable college game day segment I've ever watched.
Wow.
Now, that said, the reason you did that segment is because you and the Helinskis are, in your words, part of a club that no one wants to join. So, with that intro, Ivan, maybe I'll let you describe what we're talking about today and a few of the lessons you've learned these last several years.
Sure, Nate, and thanks for having me. So the piece on game day ran early in the season in 2018, and earlier that year, Tyler Helinski, who had been the heir apparent and had started the bowl game for Washington State and was the heir apparent for that coming season at quarterback, ended his life shortly after the 2017 season in January of 2018. Now, that was almost 3 years after our son Max had ended his life. He had been a junior at RIT in Rochester, New York. So ESPN kind of looked at me and was like, we need you to come help tell this story. And what I said to them was, we all know why you're asking me, but the story I can best tell is Mark and Kim Helinski, Tyler's parents. That's where, because if I'm not telling that story, I'm just sort of telling what happened to Tyler. And that's not where I'm an expert. Where I'm an expert is what it's like to be a parent who loses a child to mental illness. And ESPN in their wisdom agreed. And thank goodness that Mark and Kim were open to it. So we had a really, I spent a day in their home and just an emotional, soul-bearing conversations with both of them individually and together. And basically what I conveyed to them and what I tried to tell in that story and what I have taken away from losing Max is a couple of things. One, you can't stay as much as you would like to. You can't stay where your child is. Your life goes on, your life continues. And what you have to do is pick up that grief and take it with you, and pick up what you can of your child and take it with you. Because if you try to stay back where your child is, or you decide you don't want to re-engage in your life, you lose again. You've already suffered the worst possible loss you can lose. Mm-hmm. But if you're not going to be open to new things that come your way, then you lose again. And, I just had this feeling that just because this really, really bad thing happened to me and my family didn't mean that good things would stop happening. And, we had to decide, would we be open? Would we allow ourselves to be open to those good things? And, look, a lot of it is fake it till you make it, but 2 weeks after we recovered Max's body, Max basically drowned himself, we assume, in Lake Ontario in the midst of winter, in a really bad winter. And it took 8 weeks for the water to warm up enough for his body to come to the surface. 2 weeks after we recovered his body, our nephew got married. And it was like, did we want to go to the wedding? No, of course not. But again, why would you not at least leave yourself open to that joy? And so we went, and I kind of encouraged my wife and our daughters to go, just to be open to it, or just to be a witness to it, that just to see that good things would still happen to us. And it was really hard, but I felt like we needed to do that. And it was sort of a launching off, sort of a launch of, we got to keep going. And that, now it's been 7.5 years, Nate, and I'm a lot more accustomed to this burden of grief that you still carry with you, and the weight feels natural now, but it never goes away, and that was sort of the lesson I tried to convey to Mark and Kim, and it's really a lesson that has stood me well, and I think my family well, in this last 7.5 years.
Well, I think you quoted a poem that had a line that said it's like carrying a boulder up a hill that never ends.
Yes, there's a guy on Wall Street named Edward Hirsch who's also an accomplished poet, and he wrote a very small volume called Gabriel, which was about his son who died. And it's 78 pages of 3-line stanzas. It's a really interesting, unique format. But he just talks about his son and his son's death and his response to it. And that image of carrying grief being a boulder that you carry up a hill, he called it poor Sisyphus grief, which really stuck with me. And what it kind of said to me was, okay, you can't stiff arm this. It's not going to go away. You've got to pick it up and keep going. Excuse me. So that image really helped me to understand, if I try to fight this, it's just going to be wasted energy. And at that time, I didn't have any energy. You're so drained and emotionally devastated, and it just it sort of made me realize that you can't, if you try to fight this, what we told our girls and what we told one another, we being my wife and I, is that you have to grieve, because if you don't control how it comes out of your system, it will control how it comes out of your system. And it may not come out at a time that's convenient for you. So do the work, and do whatever you need to do. If it's go to a grief counselor, go to a grief counselor. If it's go howl at the moon, go howl at the moon. But you can't push it down, because it will only just spring forward, because you have to get it out. And that, the energy it would take to push it down, I think, would be enormous. So, all of that sort of played into just get used to it and deal with it.
One of the things you said that struck me as well, is if you live long enough, you're going to have to deal with grief. Now, certainly not everybody is going to join this club that you joined. No. But one thing that hit me that you said is it's important to let people grieve in their own way as well. And if you don't, if you expect, your family, your spouse to grieve the way you grieve, then that can only lead to more problems.
Yes. And what we learned and just what grief experts have said is, that there is a number out there that 50% of parents who lose a child end up losing their marriage as well, end up splitting up. And so we looked into that a little bit, out of self-defense, and what the current wisdom is that it's not the loss of the child that causes the rift. It's judging one another's grief. You never cry. Well, you always cry. Well, you never go to the cemetery. Well, you always go, whatever it is, you always go to the cemetery. And my wife and I had, the nature of our relationship was we really have always done a very good job of not judging one another. We came from very disparate backgrounds, she's Catholic from upstate New York. I'm Jewish from Mobile, Alabama. So we had a lot of work to do to figure out how to how to build a life together. So we were pretty well versed in not judging one another. I can understand why that helped. And I can understand why spouses would tend to look at the other one and go, mm-hmm. Why are he or she doing this or that? So you really, you have to let people, you can encourage them to grieve, but it's really hard to tell them how to grieve.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that really jumped out at me is you talk about grief and how it just never goes away and it's this burden you carry. But you then said something profound in the book. You say that grief is the price we pay for love. And I just wonder if you could expand on that.
Well, actually, what I said is, that saying is out there, grief is the price we pay for love. I don't subscribe to that. I think that's one step too many. I think grief is love. And if you think of grief as love, not as a price you pay for love, to me, grief is the form that love takes after you lose whoever it is you lost. Because why does it hurt so much? Because you love them so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once and I just was, as a sports writer, I'm used to thinking in similes and metaphors and figures of speech. And I was sitting at this desk and just kind of staring out this window and thinking, why do I feel that, what is it about feeling this way? And that equation sort of came into my head. Well, you loved him that much.
Yeah.
And once I thought of grief as love, it made grief less intimidating, less fearful. And I could more easily accept the fact that, yeah, okay, this is just, I feel this way because I love Max so much. And then it didn't feel like quite the burden that it could be. And that idea helped immensely.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating, equating the two. When I'm feeling the grief, that's because I feel love. That's because I love my child so much. And my wife and I heard you speak. She was at the Campbell Summit where you spoke a month back. And one of the things that you said that really jumped out at us was that you like it when people talk about Max because you're thinking about Max. And you especially love when somebody can share a new story about him because that's a way for you to create new memories.
Sure. I mean, we have a finite pool of memories of Max because he's not here to create new ones. And, people are hesitant to talk to somebody who has lost someone. It doesn't have to just be a child. People don't know what to say. They're scared. Mm-hmm. And they would sort of hem and haw. And that was me before I lost Max. People would hem and haw and they'd come up to me and said, well, I didn't want to bring him up, and I would smile as best I could just so they wouldn't think I was I was being a complete smartass, which I was, but I would say, well, you hadn't have brought him up, I wouldn't have been thinking about him, and, but, to your point about people telling us stories, if you can bring me a memory you have of Max that I don't know, what a gift, because I don't get any new ones unless you come give me one. Mm-hmm. And his fourth grade teacher came to a party we had when the book was published and told me a wonderful story about Max being in the colonial play in fourth grade, because in New England in fourth grade, you have a colonial play. It's New England. Mm-hmm. And quiet, shy, introverted Max played Patrick Henry and pounded the table, and shouted, "Give me liberty or give me death." And the whole class was like, "Whoa, Max." And she said, even I was going, "Whoa, Max." So it was just a really sweet and wonderful story. And I have lived on it for a few months now.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, Ivan, I want to be sensitive to your time. And as we wrap up here, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Anything else you've learned that's helped you or that you think could help other people who are dealing with similar situations?
Well, Nate, again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I think what we all need to remember is with mental health and mental illness to think of it, the second word, to think of it as a health issue or think of it as an illness, not to focus on mental, which is what we do as a society. And the quicker we can look at it as a disease, the quicker we can forget the stigma and begin to devote the resources we need to devote to it to fix it. We've done great strides with cancer. And there wasn't that long ago that cancer had that sort of social stigma. You didn't speak about it publicly. And if we can do with mental illness what we've done with cancer, we'll all be so much better off.
Well, message is well received here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I've enjoyed getting to know Max through the book. So your book titled "I Keep Trying to Catch His Eye," a memoir of loss, grief, and love. Yeah, there it is. I just thumbed through my book again, Ivan, and I've literally got multiple highlights on almost every page because it's just so full of insight, emotion, and power. So I just, again, wanted to thank you so much for writing the book and being open to talk about, the most difficult topic imaginable for a parent.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Nate. And I hope our paths cross again soon.